Drink it in, man.
Deep left side carry on. Picks on the block. At the 5. At the 2. At the 1 to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
Drink it in, man.
Get up, Stafford throws. It is end zone. Caught! Oh, baby, what a catch! Kenny Galladay, you're a freak! What a catch! Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Cornbread!
I love the Lions! Say it with me! I love the Lions!
Drink it in, man.
Detroit Koolaid, what is going on, everybody? We are back. We got all things Lions. We got OTAs and other things going on. And this is normally the time in the show where I introduce Grifka. But what I thought I'd do, we have a special guest. I thought I'd introduce him instead. Grifka's really not worthy of the great intro, but this guest definitely is. So our guest today, he's the king of the Quib score. He's a Lions savant. This guy probably has a cot and his own passcode at the APHQ, the Allen Park headquarters. He has more words written than Stafford has passing yards. He's a respected columnist, and he's here today to break it all down for us. And he's from the Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast. Erik Schlitt is in the building. Erik, thank you so much for coming back, man.
Of course. That was a very thoughtful intro. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate it, man. So we scrapped our plans. We've been just reaching out to you a bit. We got to talk to you before the draft. And as we said last time, our schedules are crazy busy, but you were nice enough to make some time. So we wanted to get you after the draft, talk a little bit about that, and just bounce some Lions topics back and forth here and have some fun here on the show. So sound good to you? You ready to do this?
Yeah, let's go.
So, Erik, my first question to you, again, we're going to put Grifka on pause here for a minute. My first question is, we all watched the draft. We all had our thoughts about what the Lions did, who was on the board, all that type of stuff. So kind of a direct question to you. Like, I want to know some of your, quick and general thoughts about the draft, but more specifically, like, now that the draft is over, talk to me a little bit about what you thought of it and how it merges with what they did in free agency, because I think that's really important, is how the two work together and what they ended up with after both free agency and the draft.
So the overall thing that I think I took away from the draft is that the Lions board is never going to line up with the national board narrative. It's right. We're never going to see high grades. We're never going to see, as long as this coaching staff and front office is in place, we're never going to see high marks. And to be honest, it's not necessarily a bad thing. When right. Millen was here, Millen used to get A's every year. Matt right. Millen got A's, and we saw the product of his draft. So we're never going to see those big drafts because from a national narrative, they're trying to rank players for 32 different schemes and 32 offensive schemes and 32 defensive schemes, and the Lions really don't fit the mold of what most of those schemes are, and so they're going to say the Lions reach for this guy, or this guy doesn't quite fit, or they don't see it, and there's always going to be these national guys that don't understand the intricacies of a team like the Lions, who for when you're not winning playoff games, you're not going to draw that national interest, and so they don't take the time to learn about where the holes are, what the team is doing, and they just give these kind of general broad strokes, and those broad strokes cover, this and that, but they never really will match up with what the national people think the direction of the league is headed. And so that was my overall thought is, they got players that they wanted at spots that they wanted. And when you look at and you listen to the rumors around it, it makes sense on the moves that they made. But, they're always going to get bagged on. That's just the nature of how it works. I mean, the Patriots, we've seen this with the Patriots over the years, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, where did this guy come from? It was a day 3 pick that nobody wanted. And then, he ends up starting for 5 years for them or something. So that was my general thought. Overall, when when you look at how the free agency period and the draft matched up, you basically see every need that we had that we thought that needed to be filled was addressed. Before the offseason began, I notated 17 needs that I thought that they would address, and they addressed 16 of those 17 needs that I had put out there. So they hit all the marks except for one for me on what I thought they would do. And then, I mean, it was at the point where in the 7th round, I turned to a couple of the guys in the media room and I said, the only spot on defense that they haven't filled is the reserve nose tackle. And then they drafted PJ Johnson. And so it's like you could just see how, what that they had a plan, and then they just kind of, they went through and filled as many spots as they have. And I think they have a nice, balanced, underrated roster right now.
All right. I like those answers a lot. So you definitely feel like they not only merged the two well, but even looking at it, if it wasn't the player you particularly had in mind, like looking at it now, you really do feel like they not only filled the holes, but that they were good fills, or fills that can obviously fit the scheme and really impact the 2019 Lions, you would say?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the draft, Hawkinson's going to make an impact right off the bat. I believe Tavai is going to help make the linebackers flow better than they have in the past. The linebackers have always been limited, and he has the positional flexibility to help put the other linebackers in better situations. Will Harris was a draft pick for the future, much like Tracy Walker was last year, where it's probably going to be spot play, and then he'll develop into a starting role. And you can kind of see that with some of the day 3 guys too. There's potential for them to contribute on a lower level early, but you can see opportunities for them open up on the roster long term.
Nice. Now, Grifka, I know you're over there, and I know I'm supposed to pass it to you, but I got one more quick thing before I flip the ball to you. Erik, talk to us for 1 second about, was Jelani Tavai on your radar? I know now that they've taken him, everyone's seeing the size, the football character, the ability. He definitely wasn't on, many fans' radar. Was he on yours in regards to Quib, or just in regards to when they took him, you were kind of like, oh yeah, Tavai, he's a guy that can fit this scheme, and you kind of knew him, or was he a little bit even off, the radar that you had created?
So he didn't fit Quib because he was injured, and
right. That's right.
The testing he did was kind of after the fact and like not official, and so I throw a lot of that testing out of the park for me. But as far as was he on my radar, he was. I can get you an article. When I previewed the Hawaii Bowl, he was my guy the number one Hawaii player that I said you should be looking out for. And I said, this is a guy who could end up on day 2, and if the Lions take him on day 2, he's going to compete with at the will position. So that was December 27th, I believe. So nice. He was on my radar back in December, and I know a lot of people probably didn't read my article on what to watch in the Hawaii Bowl, but it was there. You know what I mean? Like I had thrown his name out there earlier. Dane Brugler from The Athletic was a really big promoter of Tavai, and so he was there. I thought it was still earlier than like most people thought he was going to go, including myself, including Dane, who, like I said, was even his biggest supporter. But when you look at how things played out after the fact, understand why they took him where they did. For example, Miami is switching to the Patriot style with their new head coach, and they were looking for a jack linebacker. When the Lions picked Tavai, Miami traded out, and the rumors are that they were targeting him as their jack, and when the Lions took him, they didn't have another option, and that's why they traded out. So it's a scenario we've seen over the last couple of years where the Lions are either getting ahead of teams or taking guys that other teams were targeting in those spots. So while it seems like it was a reach for, on the national boards, Miami was targeting him, the Patriots were targeting him, and so he wouldn't have been there in the 3rd round. And he has the opportunity, if he fulfills what they want him to be, he could be a really a game changer on this, and as far as multiplicity goes in this defense.
Awesome, man. I knew Erik Schlitt would be all over it. I knew you'd be on top of it. I've really liked what I've seen from this guy since he's here. Grifka, time to wake up and ask Erik a question. But before you do that, I think this is only fitting. Go ahead, sir.
Well, Erik, first of all, I want to say, thanks for coming back. We really appreciate this.
Yeah.
I'm glad you can make some time. My question to you is, the way the draft was falling, a lot of people, including myself and Derek was talking about as well, that maybe the Lions were hoping to get Josh Allen
Sure.
the way the draft was going. Do you believe that the Lions would have taken Josh Allen if he was there? Or was Hawkinson always the guy? And maybe was even Ed Oliver, was he even on the radar? Were they even kind of looking at him?
So Josh Allen, I believe that they would have taken him ahead of Hawkinson. What we would have likely seen is if they took Josh Allen at 8, they probably then would have targeted a tight end at 43. And then you just basically flip those two positions. From what I have heard, Josh Allen was higher on their board, someone that they were hoping would be there, but didn't expect to be there. And
so close.
Yeah, but Hawkinson again. Hawkinson was right up there with him at that same level of caliber.
You hear that, Grifka?
I have talked
Yes.
to you. I talked to you guys last time about what a big Ed Oliver fan I was.
Me too.
And I was told that they weren't as high on him, and I think it's obvious that they weren't as high on him. The fact that they took Hawkinson over him. What I was a bit surprised at was they were also targeting Devin Bush, and again, it would have been the similar type situation if Josh Allen had gone a little earlier, and then Hawkinson went to Jacksonville. Devin Bush would have been the pick ahead of Oliver. And then we would have seen a similar situation where it would have been Devin Bush at 8 and then a tight end probably at 43. So I think Ed Oliver was a couple of picks removed, and I really don't think at 8 he was in play. If they would have, switched to trade back or something like that, it's a lot. That's more realistic to have gotten him. But the way the board fell, they had 3 guys that they liked, and with one spot picking ahead of them, and they knew they were going to get somebody they wanted. And unfortunately for us fans of Ed Oliver, he was not in those top 3 options. That's
pretty interesting how we all thought maybe Ed Oliver was the guy that they were looking at,
Sure.
but if he wasn't in even like at the top 3, that's they would have took Bush instead. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, from what I've heard, Patricia was very, very high on Devin Bush, and they would have overlooked like the weight thing because they think he could have had a big enough impact at his size that he would have been the guy if Hawkinson wasn't there.
Okay. Let's see, Derek, you have another question for Erik?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Grifka. Man, what great insight, Erik. And like you say, we can never know what's going on in the room, but you hit on all the points in regards to kind of, what fans may have been thinking and hoping for versus I know it came out really late in the process about Devin Bush, but I can totally see that. Even like, as you say it, I'm thinking about that video that came out about Quinn and him talking to Mrs. Ford about Hawkinson, saying he's our guy, and Patricia like being on board, but also in the back of his head like want another defensive toy that he just totally had faith into. So all that kind of is really interesting to hear. Appreciate you sharing kind of that, and like you say, we'll never know for sure, but I think it's really interesting to talk through. So the next question I had for you was kind of on a show we talked about. It's so early here in the OTAs and whatnot, but I just wondered if there was maybe 1 or 2 position battles that you really are going to both keep your eye on or that intrigue you. I know we have lots of them. We kind of talked about, how's the running backs going to shake out, and we got a lot of safeties, where are they going to play these guys and how are they going to shift and move them around? We kind of talked through some of that stuff, but are there a few that really, when you get your eyes on OTAs and heading towards training camp, that you think, man, I really want to keep my eyes on these position groups and see how the players break down when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I actually have an article coming out. I already wrote it. It's coming out in the morning.
Nice.
It'll be out tomorrow morning.
You can just tease it if you want to. Just tell the
okay.
people where to find it, and we can go listen to that or read that, because that's going to be awesome.
People still read it. I'll tell you. I wrote 5 things, and 4 of them were position battles, and one of them was just a thought. But the position battles that I'll be looking at when the next time I'm at OTAs later this week will be, I'm going to be looking at who's wide receiver 4, who's the receiver that's going to step up behind Marvin, Kenny, and Amendola, because that's a spot that I think is still going to have valuable snaps. And even though it doesn't seem like it's going to be a person that's going to be in the rotation a lot, it's a needed spot that they need to have somebody reliable there. So that's my first one. The second one is the shifting on the interior offensive line going to stick? I feel like if they stick with what they did last week with the shifting around of guys, if that's the same shifting or if that's the same spots they're in this week, then we might as well just write that in on the depth chart, because that's probably what's going to be all the way into training camp. Mm-hmm. The next one will be, excuse me, what is the safety situation? How is that shaking out? I want to know who. I have an idea in my head of who I think is going to be like at single high, who's going to be in the slot, who's going to be the third option at safety when they bring a safety on. So I'm curious with that as well. Like, who are the guys that who are they playing, and who's what's the hierarchy there?
Right.
The final one is about Tabai. He's played Mike so far, and I want to see if they give him a little bit of a taste of the other linebacker spots in OTAs, so that he has something to marinate on over the summer before they get into OTA. So those are the 4 key areas, 2 on offense, 2 on defense, that I'll be keeping an eye on when I'm in Allen Park in the next couple of days here.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you follow-ups, but I won't. Everybody go check out that article. The LionsWire. Erik Schlitt does a tremendous job. So Grifka, back to you, buddy. I'm sure you got another awesome question for Erik.
Yeah. It's kind of a follow-up from the one before. You mentioned Tavai wasn't one of the Quib guys because of his due to his injury. But was there one pick who maybe wasn't a Quib guy, or one surprise guy that you were surprised that the Lions took, maybe besides Tavai?
So Hawkinson was a full qualifier. Tavai wasn't. Harris was a full qualifier. Bryant wasn't because he was injured. Oruwariye was a full qualifier. Fulgham was a full qualifier. Johnson was a partial qualifier only because he didn't do everything. Nauta would have been the surprise from a Quib standpoint. And then PJ Johnson qualified as a nose tackle, so that works for him. So realistically, the only guy that didn't hit on the Quib and wasn't injured was Nauta. And so with him, it's really just a value situation here, right? Talking about a guy who can play inline, he can play H-back. He's probably really ideally suited for the tight end 3 role. In the categories that I track for tight ends, I track reception percentage, yards per target, yards per route run, drop rate, and run blocking. And in those 5 categories, there was only 2 tight ends in last year's draft class that were in the top 7 in all of those categories, and it was Hawkinson and Nauta. So from a statistic standpoint, he definitely fit what the Lions were looking for, but from an athletic standpoint, he was outside of the box. But in the 7th round, you can really throw away, some of those metrics, because you're looking at guys who, have upside, and really a 7th rounder is you're just getting a guy in camp instead of trying to, give him a big signing bonus as an undrafted guy.
Okay. Do you think Nauta has a chance of sticking with the team with all the tight ends that they've signed this offseason? Yeah,
in my mind, it's probably a battle right now between Nauta and Roberts for who's the 3rd tight end. And then if Nauta wins, Roberts is going to have his handful keeping Logan Thomas off his back for that tight end 4 spot. If they take Roberts in that 3 spot, then it will be, do they want to move guy like Logan Thomas, or do they want an inline guy as like Nauta for their tight end 4 spot? So I do think there's a real good chance for him to make it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being the 3rd tight end on the roster off the bench.
Just sorry, Derek. Just one more quick question. Do you think I'm reading a lot that Nauta would be like a main red zone target. Do you think he might be able to get a few more touchdowns simply because more people are double teaming, thinking they're going to go to Hawkinson or some of the other potent wide receivers the Lions have that might open up spot for Nauta to catch some TDs?
It's possible. I mean, he's only 6'3" and a quarter, so he doesn't create like a huge target, but he's so reliable. He doesn't drop much at all. So that's I mean, he caught 86% of the passes thrown his way, right? And he only dropped like 3% of his passes or something like that. So it's like one in like every couple of years. So like he's very reliable if you throw the ball his way. And when you get into that inside maybe the 5-yard line, I think he could be a really valuable guy because you could use him in a couple different situations and you could sneak him out where someone wouldn't be targeting him. But if he caught 3 tight ends this year, I think that'd be a win for him on the season.
Okay, that's good insight on a guy that the Lions took late in the draft that a lot of people didn't know a lot about. So, Derek, what's your next question for him?
Now, Grifka, I'm trying so hard this podcast not to bust your chops and be respectful of Erik and just ask him questions. But my favorite part of the show, other than Erik's great knowledge, is that you asked him about 2 or 3 tight end questions when all the Kool-Aid drinkers know that all you do is complain about Hawkinson, complain about the tight ends. And here that's on your note sheet to ask 3 follow-ups about tight ends. So I love that as part of the show. That's a bell for that. But Erik, I want to ask you about the guy. There's 2 guys I think that sort of make or break this draft. And, again, I bust Grifka's chops. He goes out to the park on draft day. It's the biggest day for us football fans. He's out there. Who knows what he's doing? He skips the draft. But I'm there bunkered down, kind of watching the board fall and looking for value. So are you excited about Will Harris? Because I think, again, middle of kind of, back end of the third there as a pick we got for Golden Tate. I mean, I felt like a safety was an important spot to consider, because it is a really versatile spot. You can move them around. You can blitz safeties. You can have them cover tight ends. They do all types of great things. So safeties were definitely something I looked at. Now, Will Harris, I knew, he'd been a solid football player, has that type of leadership ability. I can't say he was at the top of my safety list, but I thought in the 3rd round there, when you look back at it, I mean, he's an explosive football player, a run and hit type of guy. I really like what I see, and he's not getting talked about too much. And you said he's maybe their future pick or a developmental type player. I really think between him and then the other guy I've really been reading up on and love is Fulgham there in the 6th. I've watched some things on him, and I feel like seems to me like a smooth athlete, long arms, goes up and gets it in the red zone, has some run after catch. I know I'm throwing a little bit at you there, but you know what I'm saying. Like, are you excited about Will Harris? And, do you have upside ability for Fulgham where when you said our number 4 receiver, I know it seems like a stretch to put him in there, but I think, can he make a run for that, or can he at least be a 5? Because I think he's got some Kenny Galladay type ability when you watch him on film.
So let's start with Harris. So Harris is a guy who I think is best suited for the strong safety role, which is what the Patriots and the Lions sometimes call the Joker role. If you look at the Patriots, who have a much larger body of work, it's basically what Patrick Chung is for the Patriots. So he's a guy who is going to live near the box, but he can cover tight ends and he can hit. But he's not a guy that you're going to put out in center field. You're not going to ask him to cover running backs as much, but he can probably cover some receivers at times. That it seems like he's best suited for that. I mean, he's very underrated athletically. Like from an athletic standpoint, he was a full quib qualifier at safety, but he was also a full quib qualifier at cornerback. So he's very athletic in what they look for in a defensive back in general, and they can use him in a lot of different ways. And I think he's their future joker. I think they're hoping he turns into Patrick Chung. So right now, Tavon Wilson is going to be in that role where he's the third safety off the bench. And I think Harris is going to challenge for that. And it's very possible that he comes in and he ends up being that long-term third safety. And if he does develop into that, you have a really nice trio of safeties back there that will be signed under contract for through 2021. Right. Yeah. So that's the key, is that I think this was a pick where they were looking long-term. Now, I had a couple other safeties that were rated higher than him, but I understand why they took him, with the fact that Pasqualoni knows him from his time at Boston College. And so he understands, what he brings to the table probably better than any other coach in the NFL right now. So, the verdict is still out, but I think the verdict is still out on him as much as it was out on Tracy Walker last year. You have to put your trust in the fact that the coaches and the scouts and the front office have done their job, and they think that this is a guy that can develop into a large role. So I agree. It seemed like getting that third safety it seemed a little early in the third, but when you look at it again from a overall concept of what did they acquire, just like with Tavai, they've added a guy who they believe can start or will eventually be able to start in a position where they already have starters. And so he gives them long-term depth. He gives them current depth and the ability to do to allow them to be multiple. Will Harris allows them to put 6 defensive backs on the field and go big. And so that's something that they didn't necessarily have before. You could say Tavon Wilson could do that, but I think Tavon Wilson has a limited ceiling, whereas Will Harris has a much higher ceiling. So it's this long-term depth and that I think what really is appealing about Harris. But he's got to develop and he's got to move into that. Switching over to Fulgham. I'm a big fan of Fulgham. I really like him a lot. I think he could be, I know Oruwariye is the guy that most people think is like the best value pick of the draft, and it might have been for the Lions, but I really think long-term Fulgham may end up being that guy because he could end up being wide receiver 4 this year. Right now, I don't have him penciled in it. Right now, I don't have him penciled in at 4, but I think he can be 4. Yep. And as far as his upside, he reminds me a lot of Marvin Jones. I know you said Kenny Golladay, but I think in my mind, he played Kenny Galladay's position, the Z at Old Dominion. Yep. I think he can be a better X in the NFL, where he's more of a straight line, high point the ball. You don't worry about him getting separation, which isn't his strong point, but he has the ability to make plays, and he can score touchdowns, and he can, he just is a very under control athlete. And so I think his future this year could he could step in this year and be a wide receiver 4. And it's possible that he ends up turning into a wide receiver 2 years from now. And 2 years from now, Marvin Jones' contract is up. And so it's very possible that they have their long-term replacement for that. Now, there's a lot of development that needs to happen with him, even more than what we just talked about with Will Harris. But he's an excellent run blocker, and that's going to get him on the field early on offense, and that's going to get him on special teams. And if you can get on the field in those 2 situations, the future is bright for him. So realistically, to be wide receiver 4, you have to beat out Andy Jones. Maybe you could say Powell has some upside or Tommy Lee Lewis has some upside, but in my opinion, the way that this offense is run, he's got to beat out Andy Jones. And if he can beat out Andy Jones, he's your 4th receiver.
I love it, man. Broke it down amazingly. I'm right there with you. So, Grifka, throw it back to you, buddy.
Me and Derek, we hype this podcast as we're the fans. And I know even when we go to training camp, me and Derek, we do get a little starstruck with some of the guys there. My question to you is being able to go into the locker room, talk to these guys, one-on-one personally. I guess, what's it like? Are they easy to talk to? Are they willing to come up and just kind of chat with you when you're there? Can they be a little difficult? I mean, you don't have to name any names or anything like that, but what's it really like to be able to do that? You know, some guys like me kind of want to know that because, like I said, I want to go to training camp and just maybe get a one-on-one where they sign an autograph or really don't get a chance to talk to them.
Well, I tell you what's unique about the Lions and what they've done with giving me an opportunity and giving the guys at Pride of Detroit an opportunity last year is that, we were fans of the team. And so previously the media room had just been beat writers that were paid to cover the team that weren't fans of the team. And when they allowed Jeremy Reisman and I to come in, they said, we understand you guys are fans, but we like what you do and we respect what you do. And they said, we want to have you come in and Jeremy and I, we showed our professionalism and then they've allowed other members of our staff to come in. And so for me, I still do get that starstruck mentality sometimes when I see the players because I want this team to succeed and I want to root for them. And while my job has me, I have to be as professional as I can. There still is that starstruck mentality where you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so and so, right? But from a start, you have to kind of squash some of those feelings, in order to do your job. And so that's what I've had to do is I've had to kind of say, I understand that, I really like this guy and I like this kid as a player, but I need to be able to, walk up to him and say, hey, this is, my name's Erik and this is what I do. And it took me a while at the beginning of last year to really get my feet wet. And I spent like the first week of training camp just watching what the other beat writers did and how they interacted with the players. And then the second week of training camp, I tried to interject myself a little bit more, but I was still a little trepidatious. And what I ended up doing was the way it's set up is they'll bring players to you and then the media kind of all fights for questions, but you can also walk over to the roped off areas and you can ask players to talk to you one-on-one. And so I decided for me, it would be easier for me to talk to these players one-on-one. And so I started to just ask individual guys. And I started with rookies because I thought, hey, they're new to the system here. I'm new to the system here. And so I started asking rookies. And the first guy I asked to talk to was Tracy Walker. And because, no one had really been talking to him. I had liked what I was seeing from him in training camp. And I wanted to basically create a relationship with him. And it ended up working out really. He's kept playing better and I kept promoting him and it ended up working out for me long term. But after Tracy Walker, the next guy that I talked to was Deshaun Hand. And I got really in good with him early enough where there's a real trust level that he has with me, which he doesn't have with some of the other reporters, which is great. And he's a very kind person. What I noticed with all the rookies is that they were all very humble. And that's a characteristic, I think, of most of the rookies that Bob Quinn brings in, is that these are all humble guys that aren't really too full of themselves. They're willing to take the time to talk to you. And they were all open to have conversations with me. Now, they're still a little bit nervous about what they can say because there's things that they can and cannot say. So they're still a little bit guarded. But as the year went on, they got more comfortable with me. I got more comfortable with them. We started talking about families and you eventually it grows into some really cool relationships where you can get neat information from them that some things you can share and some things you can't. But there's always that starstruck mentality that kind of goes with it. Like I've never asked Matthew Stafford a question. Like that's just not in my range of things that I think that I'm capable of doing at this point. But a lot of the other guys they're very approachable. Some of them are very loud and boisterous and they like to have a good time. But most of the guys are willing to take the time to talk to you, even if it's just for like 3 or 4 minutes. They're really good about, making sure that you get what you need and that they can, that they understand what you're there to do and they're willing to help you out with that.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up is A'Shawn Robinson as menacing in person as he looks on TV?
Well, A'Shawn has kind of a love-hate relationship with the media. Sometimes he likes them and sometimes he doesn't. And so, with A'Shawn, he's an interesting, somebody like you just have to gauge where he's at. Right. And that's true. That's going to be true of most guys. Like when you go in the locker room after a loss, you have to be able to gauge who's ready to talk and who isn't, because, after every game I talked to Deshaun Hand, but there was one game at the end where he was really upset about the loss, and I went up to him and he was just like, "No, I don't want to talk right now," and then that's fine. But so you have to be able to gauge these things, and A'Shawn is a very emotional player, and that's fun from a player and a fan standpoint. From a media standpoint, though, it can be a little intimidating because when players play emotional like that, if they're mad, they look scary because they are much, much bigger than you are.
Yeah, I've always said I wouldn't want to meet A'Shawn Robinson in a well-lit alley in the middle of the day, let alone a dark alley at night. So.
No.
Oh, man. Grifka,
Yeah, so,
usually I beat you up for your follow-up, so that was a tremendous follow-up. And Erik, I know we're saying thank you a million times on this show, but like I'm sitting here just listening to you, like what great not only insight, but just kind of how you opened that door and kind of broke all that down was tremendous. I mean, I was going to joke after the question that like you said, how you kind of went from the fan side over to kind of the doors being open and working for the team. Like we really joke and have a lot of fun on this show. That we think it's part of, what we want to bring to the Lions fans. But I could definitely see like where you're coming from, where, we could definitely, I know Grifka sort of said the starstruck part, but I know there's definitely a part of being able to flip that switch and know that, you're in their zone, their field, their locker room and know how to be professional as well. But I really like how you broke it down about how you approach the players. And like I say, we go over the top here on our normal show and have a bunch of fun and joke back and forth. But I know I speak for Grifka. Like we really not only love this team, but over the last few years, kind of getting into this and doing some other things, making football more of a priority. Because I think for yourself and for others, we really just love football and we love the Detroit Lions. So, if you can make that your life's work or make that something that really you can do more consistently, I mean, it's got to be a blast for you. I know we have fun with it and we're curious to see where it could take us as well. Cause just easy to talk about something you enjoy or to write about it. I'm sure. And, but it is a job, and it is something that you take seriously. So respect you on all those different levels, man. It's just great. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
We only got, I think one or two quick ones here for you, and then we'll get you out of here. Again, time is valuable as well as you just been so open with all your answers here. So the last one I had was just kind of me and you talked a little bit about, on the side, I'm a big fantasy football guy and, been developing some 32 team leagues the last couple of years where you really do kind of feel almost as close to a GM as you can. These are contract leagues where you're actually given multi-year deals and balancing the budget, things like that. So, us as fans, we may never be in the draft room or be able to be a GM of a team, but some of these new leagues that are coming out and things that are available are kind of as close maybe as you can get in a different type of way. So I know you said you've moved away from the fantasy football, but I just wanted to bring one up. We're going to kind of start a show here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast on Mondays where we're going to be talking some fantasy footballs where, a lot of people are leading up to their drafts and whatnot. Did you have a couple Lions players, even though you're somewhat out of the fantasy football game these days that you think really might have a breakout year or that are in a really good situation when it comes to that? Or do you think also because of the change that we're almost playing old school football, that we're not the sling it around, put up the yards and touchdowns? It's going to be much more kind of meat and potatoes. And hopefully, as I always tell Grifka, we want W's first and foremost and at the end of the day. So do you have any takes on any of that?
From a fantasy perspective, it's going to be a little bit hard to project the Lions just because we don't know what we're going to fully get from Bevel. But based on what we've seen from him in the past and the things that he's said over the last couple of days here, where he's going to use the run to draw him in and then he's going to take deep shots and try and open things up. that's good for like your Gallaudays and your Marvin Jones. I think that gives them opportunities. And I don't know how well that speaks for Amendola. I think Jesse James and Hawkinson will kind of eat off of each other. Kerryon Johnson should be in a good situation, being the clear starter. But I do think that, last year he averaged like 11 touches a game. I think that could get to 15, but he's not going to be getting like 25 like some of your other every down backs that you like to target in fantasy. So I think Kerryon will be a nice maybe RB2, but he's not going to be like an RB1 from a fantasy perspective. And honestly, Marvin and Golladay probably aren't going to be either, but I do think it sets up well for Golladay. I think this is an offense where they can utilize him. If corners still gravitate towards Jones, that'll make things even easier for Golladay, and his ceiling just seems to be rising more and more and more. So, if I'm drafting Lions, though, my God, I would be targeting Golladay and Kerryon, but I don't think that's really surprising to anyone at this point.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what Kerryon's ceiling can be, even like you say, depending on how he's used, and then will they stretch the field? We've heard a lot about that, different years, but I'd really like to start taking the top off the defense and stretching defenses a little bit more if we can. Grifka, this is a combo question to get Erik out of here. I think this has to be asked. So, Erik, we've had a lot of battles here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast with Grifka about the TJ Hawkinson pick. Mm-hmm. Grifka's all wrapped up in like his stats and how many yards he's going to get, or how few of yards he's going to get, and how few of touchdowns. And I'm more about like, this guy is a perfect fit for this team. He's a unique guy at tight end. I don't care really what his numbers are. I care how he impacts the football game, and does he help us get over the hump in the fourth quarter? Does he help us score that touchdown in the red zone where we've been struggling a little bit the last year and a half or so? Set either me or Grifka straight on TJ Hawkinson in regards to, do you really like what this guy's going to bring to the table regardless of numbers, or do you think he's going to produce great numbers? Like, where are you at on this? Because I would let Grifka in, but he's going to say some negative things. We want to keep this positive. Like, talk to us about TJ Hawkinson, then we'll get you out of here.
So I do think that he is going to be their top option at tight end. I do think they're going to prefer him over Jesse James. I think that's going to be their top. They're going to prefer him in the run game ahead of Jesse James. They're going to prefer him as in the passing game ahead of Jesse James. But I think there needs to be limits though on what we are expecting from him in his first year. When you look at the fact that James is still going to get a large chunk of snaps. I mean, they're paying him that he's going to get a large chunk of snaps, so he's going to get targets. And then you have three receivers that are going to get targets, and then you have running backs who are going to get targets. And so, realistically, if they're targeting Hawkinson 60 times this year and he catches 45. And then of those 45, he ends up putting up like 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. That would be a successful year for me. And that's not things that are going to be like, he's not going to win you fantasy leagues or anything like that. But that's a solid rookie year. And like you said, it's really going to be about when he gets these targets and how he gets these targets. And while 6 touchdowns doesn't seem to be a lot, I do think he's going to be a guy that they go to on third downs. I do think he's going to be a guy that they utilize in the red zone. And I do think he will be a guy that they use to set up plays in the red zone. So I one of the aspects that they really liked about him was that the way that he performed in critical situations at Iowa. And when they needed a play, that he was the guy that they went to. And I think they want to utilize him as in that aspect as well. And so while that won't be jaw-dropping numbers, he'll be making key plays at critical times. And I think that's what their goal for him is to be a guy that they can use to keep the drive going or take the next step in what they want to do on offense.
I wanted to hit the bell so many times while you put out all these fires that Grifka has. I love TJ Hawkinson, a natural mover. He's going to be able to hold his own on the edge, whereas Braun and a bunch of other people always would kind of get moved off their spot. I mean, I think he's going to do so many little things that won't get noticed. Grifka, do you have anything to say for yourself, or did Erik finally talk you into that this is a good pick, this guy's going to be a good football player, and that you need to get off the soapbox and buy in that he's going to really help our football team?
All I'm saying is that if anybody's expecting Gronkowski numbers out of him his rookie year, 900 yards, 10 touchdowns, that's not going to happen. Rookie tight ends do not do that, and that's just what he stated.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I was saying the whole time.
And we've told you it's not about numbers. And Erik, do you have a no tight ends in the top 10, or are you open to all positions that may fit a team? Because that's Grifka's other beef, is like you just can't take a tight end that high.
I certainly think from a positional value standpoint that the league tends to favor other positions over the tight end.
Right.
I'm not against taking any player at any point, but I do think that people would have liked it a lot more if he went in at 13 or something like that rather than 8. And I think it would have been a much easier pill to swallow for a lot of fans. If you're willing to take him at 8, though, you're putting a lot of pressure on him. And then if you're going to give him Charlie Sanders' number, you're putting a lot of pressure on him. And
right.
So
he's a big boy.
The fact that they're doing this, though, I think illustrates how highly they think of him and how much of an impactful player they believe he can be.
Right. And my real quick counter was, if you don't take him and you miss out on this guy, there wasn't like a real suitable replacement. That was the other thing. My other reason to get him was, okay, yeah, maybe we'd love to get him 6 picks later, but if you miss out on him completely, you're missing out on that two-way tight end, really quality. Like I said, you don't find people that have, they said in an article recently how he moves and finds the spots, just really natural in what he does, as well as, just the blocking ability he has, I think is going to be incredible. So,
you know what he does that's very underrated is that there's a natural flow to his routes that is just instinctual, that are things that take time to teach other players. Like, for example, there's a clip that's been out on Twitter, you've probably seen it 100 times, but he's running basically like a square in, and he runs up the seam at 12 yards, and then he starts to arc across the middle, and the safety breaks down on him. And if he keeps his arc, the safety has momentum where the safety will just then follow him across the center of the field, and he'll stay with him, and then have an opportunity to make a play on the ball. But what he does is, when he starts his arc, when the safety makes the change with him, he then stems upfield one step. And when he stems upfield one step, it forces the safety to throttle down, and then he continues his momentum back across the field again. So while he doesn't slow down, that little stem step forces the safety to throttle down, and now he has to try and reaccelerate to catch back up with Hawkinson. And that's how Hawkinson can create separation. And that's a very natural thing that he does that I think is underrated in his routes. And that's one of the reasons why he is open a lot for your across the middle for your, like he was at Iowa, is that there's things that he just naturally does that I think will play very well in the NFL.
Absolutely, man. I just felt like we had to do a little therapy here at the end for Grifka, because I've been working on him. And I think once he sees this player, he's going to love how he catches the football, how he blocks, how he's a team player, those touchdowns when we need them, first downs when we need them, all that type of stuff. So we could talk for days. Erik, me and you could just talk football all day long. I absolutely love it. And then there's Grifka. But no, we love having you on the show. Go ahead, before I talk all about all the great stuff you do, remind people where they can find your podcast each week, all your awesome articles, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So the articles are at LionsWire. I write basically in the off season. At this point in the off season, I'm writing one article a day, sometimes 2 or 3, but you typically one a day. And then I have a nice crew over there that puts out content. So we're putting out a few articles every day at this point, and we'll continue through the summer. Go ahead.
Oh, is Jeff Risden taking resumes anytime soon? Let me know if he is. But yeah, you guys do great work over there, no doubt about it.
And then the podcast is Detroit Lions Breakdown. We typically tape on Thursdays. So we have a Twitter handle, Lions Breakdown, and then you can find us on all the different podcast formats. I think the only one we're not on is Spotify, and I keep getting told, and not Spotify, but on a different one. I keep getting told that I got to put my podcast on that, but I'm on most of the other major ones. So again, Detroit Lions Breakdown for that. And, I do that all summer as well. And then once training camp rolls around, then it starts getting chaotic and I start doing periscopes and all that jazz. And it just gets really fun and really crazy. So
what's that Twitter handle again? I know you put a lot of good stuff out there too.
Oh, mine is ErikSchlitt. And then the podcast is Lions Breakdown.
Cool, man. Like I say, you put out a lot of great stuff. I know a lot of the people that are listening to this, I put it out on Twitter before this show, and people were like, excited you were going to be on. They love hearing your normal show, and we've been blessed to have you on this show a couple times. Griff, could normally we do our gimmick at the end of the show about, do you have anything else for the people? But do you have anything, or just want to thank Erik before we get him out of here?
Erik, once again, thanks for showing up. It's great having you on here, all this inside knowledge. It's a great addition to the show, even when you're able to make it. Appreciate it. I know Derek appreciates it. Another great show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to not have to spend 3 hours writing a format for my show and just show up and do the easy work. So I appreciate it.
Oh, man, we love your insight. And like I say, we don't even prep too much, but we do love just talking Lions football. It's when we were talking, I was like, let's just come on and talk some football. And that's what we got to do today. And like I say, loved your insights. We're going to be talking all about people say this is the downtime, but still lots to talk about the next few weeks, like you say, and leading up to training camp. So, Erik, thanks again for coming on. We really hope we can have you again at some point, but getting you before the draft and now after has just been tremendous. So thanks again.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks. We'll do it again over the summer here.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Detroit Koolaid, everybody, thank you so mumuch for listening. Check us out on all those podcast platforms. We'll be back here on Friday morning with another show right here. Take care, everybody. We're out.
Pack the bags, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions.
Drink it in, man.